All right, so the reason I'm going to pivot here is because I think the big thing for those of you that have been following these discussions now over the last few years, really what we've been striving for is to support the different communities of practice within ASCE that write these guidance documents. I think the kind of the brass ring that we've been talking about the last few years as an example would be the authoring committee for ASCE 7. That's the building loads calculation standard. It's incorporated by reference into building codes all across the country and across the world. No one can characterize the needs of the standards other than the standard authoring committee. They have the final word on what is the data that is going to be used to calculate these loads, and then they can provide that calculation. People can either repeat the calculation or they can use a number that the standard generates. So what we're talking about in that example would be climate data, characterization of future conditions, uh, that's fit for purpose. And I think that's a big part of this is it needs to be fit for purpose. And to really ensure that a product is fit for purpose, we need dialogue between groups like Tom's or a GFDL that Dan helps direct, or other groups that are producing this information to make sure that the authoring committee understands the art of the possible, and then the product actually is specific to that standard. And that's the tricky part of all of this. And if we can move in that direction to anticipate the needs of these various ASCE standard committees, which there's at least 40 or 50 standards that may be weather or climate sensitive. Not all of those are active, but if we can build better dialogue between those authoring committees and the people that produce the data, and if the programs are willing to modify their agendas, modify their processes to suit that fit for purpose need, then I think we've really got something. And so that's really kind of the direction we're going. And that's why we have these next two presentations. Norma Jean's going to talk to us a little bit about what might be forthcoming from COPRI in terms of standards and manuals of practice that may be coming forward so that we can do a better job of informing those committees as to what data might be available to characterize future conditions. And then Shirley will follow up with the Environment and Water Resources Institute. But you're going to get tired of me saying that if you continue to participate in these meetings, because that's really the core of it. If we can get fit for purpose data into these standards and manuals of practice, then I think we've really got something. So with that long-winded introduction, Norma Jean, you want to share a few thoughts with us?
Okay, so um, well, I am immediate past president of COPRI. So Dan had mentioned that, and he also mentioned what COPRI stands for: Coasts, Oceans, Ports, and Rivers Institute, a relatively smaller institute within ASCE stable institutes. And we do have standards and manuals of practice and guidelines that we steward, update, and create. We've got several standards, but there's only about four that I think are applicable here that should be informed by the work that this task force is doing and the work that the federal agencies are doing in regard to how climate's changing in the long term. And that all in COPRI world, that all surfaces around peers and wars. Before I get into the actual standards, I don't think he's online, but since I am past president and I fall off the past president cliff in October, we are putting on board as COPRI's representative, Kelso Ferrara. And now he actually does work. I don't actually serve on any of these standards or manual of practice committees. I believe he does, though. And I know that Dennis Lambert, if Dennis is still on board, he's actually an active member on at least one of the ones that I'll be talking about. So, yeah, is Kelso, are you on? Nope, nope, doesn't sound like it. So I'll have to introduce him. Perhaps next month I can get him to join in. Um,
And
I'm on, Norma G.
there you go,
Yeah.
Kelso. I was going to say, I know Kelso. I've worked with Kelso. I'm looking forward to Kelso's engagement. Go ahead, Kelso. Why don't you introduce yourself?
yes, yes.
That was actually, I think, Dennis
Oh,
saying
that was
hi.
Dennis. Yep.
Uh,
Sorry. But yeah, no, Kelso and I had an opportunity to work together on the coastal effects chapter of the National Climate Assessment, which of course Allison Crimmins was the director of. So I'm excited about having Kelso engaged. I think between you and Dennis and Kelso and other COPRI members, I'm a COPRI member. I think we can continue to move forward. But I agree with you, Norma Jean. Having people that are actually on these committees is really key.
right, right. Because I am, in getting Kelso involved directly, you're eliminating the middleman. So I'll be able to, and I want to continue on as perhaps what ASCE might call a corresponding member, like member. But Kelso will be representing COPRI from when he gets plugged in. Um, so, Jordan, Tom, that's why I asked about coastal flooding, because when it comes to the large pier and wharf infrastructure, they're they're all on the coast. So most of our standards have focused on coastal pier and wharf infrastructure and have not drilled very much into the needs of the inland pier waterways ports. So we've got ASCE COPRI 80. That's one of the standards that's been kind of quiet. Omar Jaradet is the project lead, and I'm not quite sure where they are in their updating of that standard. The next standard is in revision, so that's seismic design of piers and wharves. So a lot of these standards will use ASCE 7 and its work where appropriate. So the committees reach out and look for information on loads and other items that they need in developing their standards and their manuals of practice. If the other standards that are published by ASCE just don't scratch their itch. So seismic design of piers and wharves, which is ASCE COPRI 61. Hopefully it will be finished, and the 2019 standard will be revised this year. They're hoping to have that finalized. It is through public comment, and there's just a couple of sections that need some work. So I think that the 2026 publication date of the revision is probably a good date. So they're beyond gathering that data until the next go round. One thing that is active is the sea level change considerations for port infrastructure. That's something new. That's a manual of practice. It doesn't even have a number yet. Scott Hicks is that lead. The goal of getting this out is this year. I'm not quite sure where they sit because it is going to a blue ribbon panel. So it is not a standard. It's a manual of practice. It's not as onerous. Well, I shouldn't use maybe I should use the word onerous. In the hoops that you have to jump through as a committee to get a manual of practice, either revised or created. It's just not as rigorous a process as a standards process is. So that is probably beyond committee is not currently looking at modifying things. They're probably beyond that point. But again, this is something that is continuously updated. So I don't know what they're looking at as far as their next update, because it's not on a set update schedule as a standard might be. And the final thing is, and this is something else that's new. I'm not sure if, and Dennis, you might know this. I don't think that this committee is moving this into manuals of practice. I think it's a guideline, which is even less onerous to get out the door. Although I think Dennis might not agree with that because it's hard to create something from nothing. So that's the design of piers and wharves from a mooring and berthing standpoint. So Omar Jaradat and Rune Iverson are the leads on this. They have I've sat in on a few of these their meetings because this is of personal interest, and they are gathering information. In particular, the last meeting that I was able to join in, they were looking at wind on vessels that are being moored or actually berthed, and how that force gets transferred into the bollards and other appurtenances that they're using to hold the vessel in place. So that committee is meeting in June. So they are more than likely, once they get this, they're probably still gathering information. So I'm glad Dennis is on this call because I believe, Dennis, you are active here, and Kelso may also he might be already active with this, but I'm sure that if he can peek under the hood of this committee, he may join in their work because they are, I think you're getting closer, right, Dennis, to getting this into fruition. The date that I was given is end of 26 or 2027.
For the sea level change, manual practice, or what are you?
Mooring and berthing. Do you know if it's mooring and berthing is going to be a guideline or a manual of practice?
I think a manual of practice. Same with the sea level change.
Right. I know that's because they're moving into the blue ribbon panel portion, but mooring and berthing, they are not at that point yet. So I'm glad you're on this call, Dennis. Are you involved in that work, the mooring and berthing? I thought I saw you in one of the meetings.
No, I'm not.
So you're more level change. Okay. So that those folks are probably still gathering information and may be interested in the impacts of climate change on the loads that they are dealing with that in regard to mooring and berthing. So that's all I have.
All right, thank you, Norma Jean. Anybody have any questions for Norma Jean? I think just to kind of reiterate the obvious, it's the communication with those committees is going to be really key. If I think what we need to do is kind of cast a fairly broad net, make sure they're aware of some of the discussions that are taking place here. Like, for example, the ASCE Committee on Adaptation to a Changing Climate, which I'm part of, is doing a compound flooding manual of practice. So that one is going into the blue ribbon page phase. We've got to catch these committees when they're formulating the reports so they know what information could be available. And so, I think we just need to know who's on first so we can try to pursue that. I know Brian Parsons can help, Dustin can help. The ASCE staff are really good at that, but they are spread so thin that if we can do the peer-to-peer component of it, that would be really helpful too. So as part of the follow-up to this, I'll reach out to Kelso. I'll copy you and Dennis, Norma Jean, and we'll try to get the information flowing. Okay.
Yeah, I don't sit on these, but when because I have been as president and past president, we often meet with ports and harbors, and that's often when these committees are meeting also. And so I make sure that if the sea level change committee's meeting, I sit in that, and so that I can actually talk about the task force's work, and also the mooring and berthing. They were actually about a year ago. I was able to. That's the last time I sat in on that meeting. But Omar and Rune are both aware of the task force. But you've got to, like you said, you've got, there's only a certain active part of the process where the committee is actively looking at What do we change if it's a revision? If it's new, what do we need, and where do we get the information? And this task force can connect some of the dots, some of the needs to those providers that can provide the information needed.
Right. No, well said, Norma Jean.